I'm Catherine O'Brien at Happy with Baby, and I'm so excited to be here today with Kara, who is a sexual health educator in the Sacramento area. Kara, can you tell us a little bit what that even means, being a sexual health educator?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, first off. I'm so glad to be here. So what I do as a sexuality health educator is I help people navigate conversations around sexuality and sexual health and all that entails. So I have a business right now called Reframing Our Stories, because I found that whenever I would go and teach people about sexual health and sexuality, I do workshops and different things, especially when I would talk to parents and adults, that I was helping them reframe a lot of the things that we are told growing up, right? That doesn't actually compute or make sense as we get older. So I do a lot of reframing for people that way. But I spend a lot of my time working with families. Actually, that is what I love doing, is helping parents learn how to speak with their kids about sex and normalizing those conversations. And also parents then hire me to teach their kids. And we do it around a setting that's comfortable, a dining room table before COVID, or in their backyard now, things like that. But I also have been hired at schools to come in and teach health class. And I also, because I have a background in theology, I go into church spaces and help them learn how to talk about sex without shame. So that's something I also really enjoy doing.
Yeah, that is, I was just thinking about that. My son was supposed to have his sexual health class last year, and because of COVID, they never had it. And then we've had some discussions, he is 11 now, so puberty is
11 is something. Yeah,
it is something.
It's the truth.
Well, when do you recommend that people start talking to their children about sexuality?
So sexuality, what people don't realize when they think about sexuality, I think we tend to think about it in two ways, like how you identify, what's your orientation, and different things like that. But really, sexuality entails the whole person. It entails the way we feel about each other. It's the fact that we are created as a sexual, we are born as a sexual being. And so I try to help parents and guide them that you can start talking about sexuality and implementing these conversations from the moment they are born, which people are like, what? But just doing the fact, like so much of our understanding about love happens with attachment to our kids, right? So practicing eye contact when we're breastfeeding and bottle feeding, practicing massage and learning about different massage that you can do with your infants. When you're changing their diapers, you say, you use the proper names, right? Oh, I am wiping your bottom. I am wiping your vulva. I am wiping your penis, saying things like that, helping them when they take a bath, being able to just name the parts, because oftentimes, because a lot of us were not taught how to do that, it feels uncomfortable.
Right.
But the more we start from the very beginning, the less uncomfortable it will be as we move forward, because we are starting a foundation in which to talk from. And so we just do little talks along every single day, little comments every single day. And then it becomes a natural part of our everyday dialogue.
Right. I love that, because I think that is one of the challenges, is if we weren't, so many people I talk to, for instance, were never talked to about sex, or even, puberty, what happens when you start your period as a girl. And so then they're like, I don't even know how to talk to my child.
Exactly.
I'm going to wait till they hit 13 and then leave it to my partner to do it,
Yes. Yes.
Often.
Yes. And so much of, some of our upbringings and people who I talk about, we were given silence, right? Or it was like, here's a movie or here's a book with very little follow-up. And You know, we'd also watch movies that were inundated with sexual content constantly, but then no follow-up discussion. And so I tell parents, you know, silence is misinformation and shame. And so even if we feel uncomfortable, the point is, one, I tell parents all the time, parenting is the hardest job.
Yes. Yes.
So offer yourself as much grace as you can, because you will make mistakes and you're going to say things that you wish you didn't have said. And then you say, okay, but I can try again. And so we just have to try again and do it over and over and over again. And I talk about, it's important. I say things like, there's car talks and shower talks. Ooh. And what that means is, if we are uncomfortable with having these conversations with our kids, then we have the talks to ourselves in the shower or in the car. Okay. And you practice. Which sounds like, I know I do my best thinking in the shower in the car. Maybe other people don't. Yeah. But a lot of these conversations, we have to practice ourselves, because when we go and talk with our kids, we want to feel calm. We want to be presenting it in a calm manner. And we want to show them that we ourselves are not feeling awkward. And so in order to do that, we have to have practice saying them ourselves. So do it in the shower of saying like, okay, I'm going to practice saying these words, you know?
Right.
If you haven't started, or doing it in the car. And also the car is a really wonderful place to have these conversations, right, with your kids in different ways. So I just think it's something where we have to recognize we were not taught well. And I say to parents all the time, imagine what your life would have been like if your parents or caregivers, whoever were raising you, had said to you, I care so much about you, and I want you to have the best relationships that you could possibly have. So therefore, we're going to have conversations that might possibly feel uncomfortable, but in order for you to have what I hope for you, then we're going to have these talks. Right? Like, how different would our experience have been?
Yes, absolutely. And then if we're able to talk to them and talk to them about, you know, difficult things, they're then able to talk, or it's easier for them to then come to us and talk about those things as well.
I will say, when I do workshops with high schoolers and college age young adults, I ask them first before I go in, because I like to customize based on who I'm going to be working with.
Right.
What they want me to talk about. And I will tell you, more often than not, it's conversation and communication, because they say, we don't know how to do this. And it's because it's not been modeled, and we are not giving them practice. So if we are expecting them to have these conversations around protecting their bodies, or around what they need in a relationship, but we haven't modeled that for them, or if they've not seen how that has happened, how do we expect them to have those conversations? Right. And so I do role playing all the time with young adults. And we work through it, and they feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, it is uncomfortable. And a lot of adults can't do this either, you know? Yeah. So we have to practice. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at it either, right? It's just, we all have to figure out and practice and move into those spaces.
Right. And like you said, the more we do it, the easier it becomes to like make it part of, instead of this like, you know, one of those things you don't talk about. You don't talk about sex. You don't talk about money. You don't talk about religion.
Right.
You're like, I will talk about all those things.
Yes. I've been trying to tell youth more too, especially if we talk about our safety and different things like that. I've been using the phrase, you are worth the awkward. Right? You are worth the awkward. And I think if we recognize that, and if we even say that to ourselves as parents, like, oh my gosh, if someone had said that to me. Right? Yeah. So if we can instill that into our kids, like, we're going to be in awkward moments all the time within relationships. We are experiencing that now with, you know, navigating Thanksgiving and navigating health. It's awkward. We have to have awkward conversations.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And COVID has made everything that much more awkward and intense, I feel like.
Oh gosh. Yes.
So it's like
Completely.
conversations you were hoping could like be not as hard are difficult because you're kind of thrown right at you.
Mm-hmm.
What,
For sure.
you made me think of something like, what about consent, body consent, a thing, you know, that I know this was never, when I was, okay, let me get my thoughts straight. When I was a child, it was like, oh, you need to give them a kiss or you need to give them a hug. If you're like, no, I don't want to. And I think parents now, we're more aware, like, no, if they don't want to, which can be an awkward conversation, or like, how do you say no? But if I want to teach my child, if I want them to learn to be able to give consent as an adult or as a teenager and say it's not comfortable, and I know I can say it's not comfortable and get away from the situation, then I need to teach this from an early age.
Right. Yeah. So we can practice consent every day in our homes by even, sorry if I'm moving my computer around, by saying things like, may I give you a hug? Like we need to do that as parents too. May I give you a hug? If they say no, which I've received a lot from my preteen, then you say, okay, I would love to give you a hug at some point. You let me know when you're ready for one.
Right.
You know?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
It gives
that follow-up.
Yeah. It gives them a choice. And then maybe you don't feel like a hug, you know? So like you also have to talk, like you have boundaries too. Right. So being able to practice those things and providing choices for kids too, of saying, okay, what are you comfortable with? Because those are other conversations we have to get used to. What makes you comfortable? What's uncomfortable? Sometimes when I'm just horsing around with my kids, I have done different things around touch, and I have taken my kid's arm and I'm like, may I touch your arm? And they say, yeah. I'm like, okay, do you like this kind of touch? And I would move firmly on their arm and they'll be like, yes. I'm like, what about the light touch? And they're like, no. So I feel like different times as parents too, it's good for us to help our children learn what they like and don't like, what is okay and not okay. And I also think, you know, it gets tricky too about how we talk about, what's the word I'm talking about? Authority, right? I like to distinguish with them because sometimes we feel like we can't say no to authority, right? And so to distinguish, I say, if the authority figure, I'm like, there's different relationships. There's the parent and their child, right? And there's a sense of respect and authority that happens there because our job is to help you learn about being safe, right from wrong, you know, like helping you become your best self, these things. There's the teacher and student, right? So teacher has to be the one to guide you into education. You need to listen to the rules, these different things. And like the doctor patients, right? So I go through this, but then I say, if the authority figure is doing something where you feel threatened in your body, and if you feel threatened emotionally, if you're getting hurt, if you constantly feel bad, or if they're trying to hurt your body in a way that's uncomfortable, then that authority is using their power incorrectly. And that's not okay. Right? Because I think there needs to be something that we distinguish between that. Because so often our consent has been violated by authority in our lives, you know, or with young kids. And so it's important to have those conversations.
Yeah, no, really, that is really important. You make it sound easy. Like, but again, I think it's like, because you practice it all the time, but I'm like, oh, that's so easy. That's like, that's such a good question, or that's such a good example. So.
Well, I always tell people, one of my also slogans is I say, start simple and build from there. So we know so much as adults that we make things complicated because we know how complicated it is. Right. And so we have to be able to strip away some of that complexity and meet them where they're at. So when they ask a question that's sexuality, you know, that's based around a topic of a sexual nature or their bodies or different things, always ask the question back to them or say, tell me what you mean by that. Because sometimes we go this way, but they're going that way. Right. So gain an understanding of where they're going. And then you're like, oh, right. Okay. And then you simplify things, you know, and you make it as simple as it can be. And then you slowly add on and add on for what your child, is capable of handling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each child is different. Even if we have siblings, they're going to respond differently. So we have to cater to each child and their needs.
Right. So there's my next question is, how do you know when they're ready to hear something, or like how fast to go? And I guess my second question is, my kids are, for instance, are 4 years apart. And there's been times where my son has then told my youngest things, and I'm like, what? And then there's like no context to it. So
the younger children are always going to know more. I feel like there's no way that you can change that. My youngest, he knows more because we've had these conversations, and the kids also guide you by just everyday activity and what you see them getting involved in, and the life experiences. I've had to, based on, I started having these conversations with my kids when they were in kindergarten because of the things they came home and told me what other kids said to them. Right. And so then you navigate how you talk to them about that stuff. And, sometimes you watch things on YouTube and there's things that come up and you're like, oh, I didn't want you to know that, but there it is,
Yeah. You're like, oh,
and then they look at about this. Then they look at you and you're like, all right, so we're going to break this down and I'm going to talk to you in the most simplistic way about what that meant, So really, you're going to know based on what they bring to you, what you see on a daily basis. If you see stuff on the news, if you hear stuff on the radio, our songs, if we listen on the radio and we're driving in the car, are consumed with love, right? They talk about love. So what do you think love is? What are the, having these conversations, because those are sexual health conversations too. What does trust mean? How do you feel cared for? These are all related to sexuality and sexual health. What do you love about your body? What can your body do that you think is spectacular, right? Because we need to have a sense of joy around the way we experience our world, and that's through our body. Right. And so tell me what that's like for you, like asking these questions, because then again, that builds the template of having the conversations that get more in depth when we get older.
Right. Oh, that's so good. So helpful. And just like breaking it down. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a little cheat sheet.
Right.
Questions
like little Post-it notes.
All over. Yes, exactly.
Totally.
So another topic that comes up and that I've been hearing more and more recently is parents that more of this idea of like gender fluidity. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but, and so struggling. So there's like some struggles like on how, like wanting to support their child, maybe some pushback from like family members that will then, reinforce something else, but just kind of trying to figure out like, I'm not sure where my child is yet with this and what is normal and what's not normal. And, any ideas or suggestions on how to help parents?
I think
the most.
If a child comes to you and talks about maybe they don't feel like the sex they were born, right? So the first thing to know is our gender identity is in our brain. The largest sex organ in our body is our brain.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so our brain tells us who we are. And so if your child comes and says to you how they feel and what they think, then you say, okay, how can I help you, or what do you need? And you go just on this journey together, right? And you kind of figure out, there's so many books right now around gender fluidity, which is great, and so many resources that I can hand and give to parents around this. But whether or not, one of the things, like sometimes maybe the kids are just wanting to explore, and because really, when you allow a child to just be a child and play, they're going to want to play with lots of things and not worry about it. We are the ones who tell them how they're supposed to be, right? They enter into a social construct and we say, this is how you need to act. But if you give them more freedom, they're more apt to be more open to different things, right? But it's based on if it's persistent and consistent. If it's something that keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, and then you also can just basically tell on their demeanor of when they are able to express themselves in the way that they feel, you see more joy, right? And so then you realize, okay, this is who they are, right? And so then you go through that of helping them navigate those changes in that world, and you know, whatever that may be, if that's changing their name, is that buying a new wardrobe, is that doing these things. And so there's many resources now available to help in that, that I can lead families to. But really just, you know, it's not, I think the hardest thing sometimes, I think as parents, is we sometimes feel like our child is a reflection of who we are. But we have to understand that our child is an individual.
Right.
And we have to let those things go of what our expectations are of who they're supposed to be, right? Right. And we have to allow them to live into who they are. Right. And we have to help learn what that is with them and be the best support, because those who are gender fluid, the ones who do well are the ones who are supported and who are cared for and loved. Right. Completely. Right. Those who have lots of struggles later are the ones who are told they're not okay. You know, and so it's just a lot of us, you know, it's a learning curve for us to understand more about. I'm so grateful that we're being more open to the fact that gender is much bigger than we make it. Exactly. Which I think is huge. I think it's so important. Yeah. So I'm glad we're getting to that point. It is still a learning curve for us though, right? Because we have been told for so long that there was only two ways to be. Right. When really there's not. And I talk about to people, I'm like, if you look at all the species we have on this planet, right? And the variety of insects and, you know, ocean life and different things, but then we make humanity to be so small. Like, why would we, you know, like there's so many different humans out there. Right. And so, you know, like if we're able to help that creativity and imagination that we have with all these other things on our planet also be given to humanity, then how different could we be? Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that picture. And I just see like all these like bright colors and different shapes and sizes and everything. And that image that's beautiful. And I think you said something is key there. And I think this is throughout parenthood, right? It's like we have to let go of our expectations of what we think for everything, of what we want, of what society says, you know, what our parents have told us, all those things. Yes. You know, and figuring out like what is going to be best for you and your family and in your child, like what do they need, and let them bloom how they're going to bloom. Yeah. You know, and personality plays into it too, right? Like we have personalities and sometimes they don't mesh as well. Like this is the truth, right? Yeah. So we just have to continuously learn how to adapt, you know, and that's something as a parent that I'm doing too, you know, like sometimes I'm with my kids and like, I don't understand that at all, but okay. You know, like I'm learning, you know. Yeah. Why is that? Why is this a thing? I don't know. So that's your interest. All right. You know, so I think that's the hardest thing. I think the hardest thing is the expectations that we grow up with, that we put on ourselves. That includes marriage, that includes partnerships, that includes the way we're supposed to be in our lives and what success is and different things. Like it's really dismantling and changing our expectations of what the world puts for us and then what we know is correct for us, you know? Right. Yeah. Which is hard. Yeah. No, I think last you had erased so many points. I feel like I could talk to you
all day. But is there like, we're almost at a half hour, and I just want to, keep this so, parents have time to watch. I know we're busy. We're inundated with lots of information all the time.
Sure.
But is there like anything that you feel like, hey, I want to leave people with today, or something to think about, or questions, maybe a specific question to ask themselves?
Yeah, I just think one of the things too, in order for us to also understand and be able to have these conversations with our kids, is we have to take some time to understand the process we had growing up. So what was that like for you? What was the conversations or lack of conversations like for you? What possible trauma did you experience, and how has that shaped you? Because we can get triggered when we have these conversations. And so the best thing to do is to start the process of understanding yourself and understanding what are your values and your beliefs around these things. It's important to define what sex is, because actually everyone has a different definition of what that means. Because then, we need to also help our kids as they get older come up with their own definition. So what does that mean to you? What does that mean to your co-parents? So there's more to think about. And I think we get a little bit fearful of entering into these because it's a lot and we learn a lot about ourselves. But I will tell you, I believe, and this is why I do this job, I wholeheartedly believe that if we spend the time to understand ourselves and to learn about sexuality, we will change as a society 100%, because it affects everything. It affects our politics. It affects the way we enter, the way we are religiously. It affects so many things and how we interact with one another.
Yeah. I was gonna say that too. Yeah. And I feel like we do have so much more information now, and we're constantly learning and changing. And so, I mean, it's a hard time to be a parent. I'm not joking, but it's also like, I feel fortunate to have the resources and to know more, to be a better parent, or to, more informed parent, not a better parent, but a more informed parent.
Yeah. No, it is 100% super hard. I'm a parent, and I'm like, my kids are getting older, and I was like, at first you're like, oh, it's going to get better. And I'm like, no, it's just more complicated.
It's like a different kind of challenge. I feel like each stage gets you ready for the next one. You're like, oh, this is so hard.
Oh my
First,
gosh,
they start you off with like sleep deprivation. They take you down, and then
it's just,
you get the other challenges.
We have said it's just a poor model. Like you start off just exhausted to begin with, right? And then you have a baby, and they're like, "Here you go, sleep deprived people."
Well, and I think the key thing is, and this will be my last question for you, is I think the key is we need help. We can't do this parenting journey by ourselves. We need help. We need support. We need to know where to look for the resources, or who to ask to help us find them, and to be able to like encourage and support each other.
Let me say this. If I had you in my life when I was a mom, when I started as a mom, my life would have been better. Right? It's just, those are the things. Like, I think we have to say that we need help. We can't do anything alone. And that's why, like, I know people need help with us, with talking about sex. So that's why I'm like, okay, this is something for some reason I feel fine doing. So let me help you with this.
Well, tell us how you can help us. I know you teach, I know you have some classes, and I believe you're doing them some online now. So tell people, like, if they have more questions and need information.
So my website is reframingourstories.com. I provide parent nights, like if parents just want to talk, they get to pick the topics. I come and I talk to them. Now everything is virtual or in the backyard with masks. I also do table talk sessions, like I said, where parents hire me to start teaching their kids. We usually have a moment afterwards we used to, before COVID, have like a meal together as a way of saying, we all know what just happened here. We all just had a conversation. This is recognizing that it's normal.
Yeah. I love that.
We can continue to do that. So yeah, you can find me. I'm also on Instagram at Reframing Our Stories, and I have a podcast called the Reframing Our Stories podcast. And it's really, I just want to be a resource for people and to help them, because there is so much that we have to navigate that's exhausting. And so I just want to be able to help people, like say, here's all the things you need to know. Here's this resource, this resource. Let me help you learn how to have these conversations and take it from there.
Well, and I just love how you like kind of simplify and break things down to make it feel less like oh my gosh, I've got to go have the,
right,
the talk with my kid.
The talk. Right. The talk.
Yes.
Right.
So,
which it shouldn't be the talk. It's conversation.
Yes, it's lots of conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And
yes, I loved it.
I look forward to maybe we can talk again too.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.